Anime has always been traumatizing fans with the possibility of their favorites being killed. There is nothing quite like the feeling of sitting on the edge of your seat while a beloved character faces off with some sort of world-ending evil or good, depending on the series. Certain character deaths manage to reverberate through time, with characters like Wolfwood in Trigun affecting audiences decades after the show first aired. There is an art to an impactful anime death, assuming, of course, that the death manages to stick. Death is a part of a lot of these stories and, like in real life, it's pretty scary. My Hero Academia is no stranger to death. Sir Night-Eye and Midnight made a huge hole in the hearts of fans when they died, as well as in-universe. However, they were relatively minor characters in the grand scheme of the plot. The series has, seemingly, stayed pretty far away from killing off major characters. Even characters with death flags as bright and red as All Might still remain standing this deep into the plot, even though he was echoing the ideas that surrounded Jiraiya all the way back in Naruto. However, one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise has a different fate. Despite being introduced as Izuku Midoriya's childhood bully, Katsuki Bakugou quickly became one of the most popular My Hero Academia characters. Although he remains as blunt and coarse as ever, fans are happy that Bakugou has finally understood the meaning of friendship. Unfortunately for him, this newfound sense of loyalty would end up causing his death. Given Bakugou's importance to the series, we have updated this article with some more relevant information. Bakugou is a case of go big or go home. Debut, Episode 1, Izuku Midoriya. Origin, as the shonen anime rival character and hot-blooded childhood friend of the protagonist, Katsuki Bakugou is a character who was simply made to make the audience fall in love with him. Fans loving a character enough has saved them from the chopping block in the past. Vegeta and Hai are great examples of this, and the element of rivalry often makes them attractive to the audience. Bakugou really started as Deku's bully, telling him to kill himself and threatening him constantly. Despite his big reactions, Deku isn't ever actually afraid of Bakugou and continues to consider them relatively good friends. Meanwhile, Bakugou is loud, brash, and rude, with a flashy quirk and a chip on his shoulder so deep that he could hold grenades in it. The fandom decided that this was the horse they were going to bet on, making him the winner of nearly every popularity poll in both Japan and the US. Bakugou has, arguably, one of the more impressive character arcs in shonen as a whole. He goes from being a genius who cannot deal with any externalizations of his own perceived weakness to someone who was able to work well in a team and become more open to his once-hated childhood friend. Bakugou offered an interesting new look at the idea of perfectionism and how it could affect a young man like him. His involvement in the plot is also not to be underestimated. He is easily the most important person in Deku's life, aside from possibly All Might. Bakugou's kidnapping and showing at the sports festival, along with his internship and growth, have been vital to Deku's own journey. Deku and Bakugou's battle to reconcile is treated as one of the most important fights in the entire franchise. So, of course, Bakugou was going to get a death scare or two, but very few people expected him to actually die. During the final war arc, Tamura punches a hole straight through him and effectively ends his life. This gets all the pomp and circumstance it deserves, as he had just thrown himself into the fray with nothing but determination and heroism. This would have been an intense and heartbreaking loss for My Hero Academia, something incredibly difficult for the writer to do and pull off so beautifully. But that could never have actually been the end for a character as incredibly important and beloved as Katsuki Bakugou. Bakugou's death was never going to stick. He died in episode 149. Bakugou has the same level of plot armor that Deku does. Despite the genuine sorrow and rage of the characters who witnessed Bakugou's death and the fact that his heart was, according to Best Jeanist, completely shredded, he does manage to be saved. This is where things get a little bit weirder. Deadshot, a pro hero with the power to reduce his body's density to the point of being razor sharp and thin, uses his greatest ability, Zenith, to use himself to basically knit Bakugou's destroyed organ together and act as his beating heart. It doesn't make a lot of sense and opens up a lot of questions, but it does get the explosive favorite back up on his feet. This catastrophic injury also fails to get him out of the fight. Bakugou goes on to fight All for One in a truly glorious battle despite having been pretty much dead only a short while ago. The whole moment is truly epic, one of the best fights in manga with a lot of drama and great character moments. This also has the effect of making Bakugou's death feel almost entirely pointless. The wound barely seems to slow him down and his body doesn't seem to be rejecting Deadshot as an organ, so it doesn't really feel like the death meant anything more than shock value at its core. Killing a character like Bakugou is an incredibly risky proposition. He is the kind of character people will stop reading the manga for it even a sign of his loss. This means that, while his death was a surprise, his resurrection was very much expected by anyone who knows anything about anime. Bakugou's fate was written and defied all at once. He very well could have died, It could have been one of the most tragic moments in the show and become something that Deku would grapple with for the rest of his life. It could have been the kind of moral event horizon that could have truly made the entire story Attack on Titan levels of dark. But that isn't what My Hero Academia is about. Hope is one of the driving forces of the entire plot and a major theme of the franchise. Finding hope in hopeless situations is practically what the true heroes of the story are about. Bakugou is symbolic of that hope, not only for the characters in universe, but also for the people watching the story unfold. Is it narratively satisfying to kill a character like Bakugou only to undo it as quickly as possible? No, not really. It is more of a shock value centerpiece that ends up not meaning much of anything aside from the possible death of another character who matters less to the audience, but it does work to further the central idea of My Hero Academia as a whole. Bakugou's death would have been the death of hope for Deku and others. He would have been the kind of loss the plot couldn't recover from. A victory over the villains after that point would have been at far too great a cost. It would have undermined the entire core of the series, the act of finding hope and clinging to it no matter what. Bakugou's fate is to uphold the very core pillar of the story and to keep the entire game afloat. While he may have been out of focus for a while, Bakugou's death and resurrection was the symbol of what All Might was always fighting for: hope and peace. What happened to Bakugou after Tamura was defeated? Bakugou ultimately manages to defeat All for One in his original body, but he also saves All Might, effectively paying him back for fighting AFO during the Kamino incident. Although Bakugou loses consciousness for a while and is taken to a hospital, he briefly rejoins the fight to help Deka defeat the combination of Tamura Shigaraki and All for One. It's not very clear if his actions actually help at this point, and yet Bakugou proudly announces that he's going to surpass Deku. Following Tamura's defeat and the end of All for One, Bakugou is shocked to learn Deku will be losing his access to One for All. Watching Bakugou cry in this scene highlights just how much he has grown over 400 chapters. While simultaneously embarrassing Deku for comic relief, Class 1A's accomplishments after the time skip, Tenya, Achiko, Tsuyu, and Momo tour schools and offer quirk counseling. Shoji Mizo wins the Imamura Peace Prize for his work protecting heteromorphs. The adults of former Class 1A help create an armored suit for the quirkless Deku. Very few people now think of Shoto Todoroki as Endeavor's son. A few hilariously endearing scenes later, the first and only My Hero Academia time skip takes the story 8 years into the future. Deku has become a teacher at UA, whereas Bakugou is still struggling to take the #1 pro hero slot from Mirio Togata aka Lemillion. Shoto Todoroki is also still in the running, but Bakugou seems determined to become the greatest hero far more than anyone else. His dedication hasn't paled even slightly, once again showcasing one of the cruxes of My Hero Academia, that heroism requires constant effort, patience, and perseverance.